Max Verstappen started 14th on the grid for the 2022 Belgian Grand Prix, but easily won the race comfortably to secure his most convincing victory of the season. But there's been talks about Red Bull cheating. To find out more about this story, stay with me till the end of the video. Max Verstappen, who was leading the championship, made rapid progress through the field in the early laps of the race and passed Carlos Sainz Jr. to take the lead in the race before more than half of the race had been completed. Sainz was passed by Sergio Perez, who took second place, and the Ferrari driver went on to finish in third place, completing the podium. As the field began their formation lap, they were greeted by crystal clear blue skies and a course that was already quite warm. Sainz was the only driver in the top 10 to choose the soft tyres for the beginning of the race, which allowed him to start in the pole position. Perez got off to a poor start and fell behind Fernando Alonso, as well as the two Mercedes drivers, Lewis Hamilton and George Russell. Sainz, on the other hand, was able to maintain the lead by using his soft tyres when the lights went out. Alonso and Hamilton ran side by side into Leclerc, but the Mercedes driver left his rival little room at the apex and the pair collided, sending the rear of Hamilton's car into the air and causing an oil leak on his Mercedes. Alonso was able to recover and finish the race in second place. As Hamilton's speed decreased, the drivers in the pack behind him fought to get by him until they were instructed to take him off the track. Sainz was in the lead, followed by Perez, Russell and Alonso until the second lap, when Nicholas Latifi lost control on the exit of Leclerc and collided with the uninvolved Alfa Romeo of Valtteri Bottas, putting both drivers out of the race. The incident prompted the deployment of the safety car. Due to a piece of his visor tearing off and being lodged in his right front brake duct, Charles Leclerc was forced to make a pit stop under the safety car. Because of this, he moved further and further towards the back of the field. But who was responsible for this? After some investigation, it was quickly determined that the reason Leclerc had to make an early pit stop was that a piece of his visor had become lodged in his brake duct. Those of you who are unfamiliar with the term tear-off should know that it refers to the numerous layers of film that are adhered to the driver's visor. When the film gets too full of dust and other things, a motorist can merely take it off and have a fresh vision once again. There are frequent instances in which drivers get rid of their tear-offs. It is not unusual for a single race to involve a significant number of tear-offs. The evidence that the piece of Verstappen's tear-off was the one that found its way into Leclerc's brake duct is simply unlucky. It is an extremely uncommon occurrence. Even though it is extremely unlikely to occur, it was the one that forced Leclerc to make an early pit stop. Following the pit stop, it was impossible to tell which driver's tear-off it had been because they are all so visually identical. On the other hand, some Twitter detectives and Ferrari themselves have looked into the onboard film from the first lap of the race. It has been determined that Verstappen was the one who lost control and tore off the tyre. Continuing the race, Sainz was able to maintain his lead when the race was restarted on lap 5 despite losing control of his vehicle at the bus stop chicane just before the restart. Following the completion of the previous several laps, Verstappen methodically moved up the order until he was in third place, just behind his teammate Perez. Sainz, who was leading the race, came into the pits at the end of lap 11 to switch to medium tyres. He then rejoined the race in 9th place. All of the drivers began to complain about excessive tyre degradation. Along the Kemmel Straight, when the Ferrari was no longer in the way, Verstappen was able to get by his teammate and take the lead. Perez came into the pit lane ahead of his teammate, and when Verstappen eventually opted for medium tyres at the beginning of lap 16, he rejoined the track just ahead of Perez, coming back to within 4 seconds of Sainz, who was in the lead. After starting the race in 14th position on the grid, Verstappen made his way up to first place before the halfway point of the race by catching and passing Sainz along the Kemmel Straight. This took just 2 laps of the race. As a result of Sainz's inability to keep up with Verstappen, Perez was able to pass him and take second place. At the beginning of lap 21, Perez made his way up behind the Ferrari and easily passed Sainz into Leclerc to give Red Bull a 1-2 finish on the track. Soon after that, Ferrari brought Sainz into the pits to switch to hard tyres so that he could continue racing until the end of the race. 2 laps later, Perez did the same thing. At the end of lap 30, Verstappen also made his second and final stop for medium tyres. After this stop, he was able to resume the race with an 8-second advantage over his teammate. As the laps went by, Verstappen extended his lead over the other drivers. In the closing stages of the race, Ferrari made the decision to bring Charles Leclerc out of the race from 5th place to attempt to go for the fastest lap. This decision was made even though Leclerc expressed his desire to not risk his position. Regardless, Ferrari brought him in for service and he resumed the race in 6th position behind Alonso. After 44 circuits, Verstappen took the checkered flag to win the race and extend his lead in the championship standings. He finished 17 seconds ahead of Perez, and Sainz rounded out the podium 9 seconds after Perez. After the race, Russell came in 4th place, 2.2 seconds behind Sainz. Leclerc overtook Alonso on the final lap, but his attempt to set the fastest lap of the race was unsuccessful, and he finished in 5th place. However, the stewards announced that Leclerc had violated his pit lane restriction by 1 km/h and immediately issued him a time penalty of 5 seconds for the infraction. Because of this, Leclerc fell further behind Alonso in the overall classification. The second Alpine, driven by Esteban Ocon, finished in 7th place, beating off the Aston Martin, driven by Sebastian Vettel, and the AlphaTauri, driven by Pierre Gasly. Alexander Albon finished the race in 10th place, earning the final point for Williams by fending off a pack of vehicles in the closing third of the competition. Binotto defends brave Ferrari. Mattia Binotto, the principal of the Ferrari team, has disclosed that a piece of debris that came off Max Verstappen's visor was the cause of Charles Leclerc's crash during the Belgian Grand Prix. It was discovered that a tear-off had become caught in a brake duct, and Binotto later claimed that the piece that caused the problem had originated from Verstappen. Leclerc started the race near the back of the field and worked his way up to finish 5th. However, he was a significant distance behind Verstappen, who drove his Red Bull to an impressive performance, and Leclerc had to settle for 5th place. To add insult to injury, however, Leclerc was demoted to 6th place shortly after the checkered flag because he was caught speeding in the pit lane while attempting to claim the fastest lap point on the final lap. This attempt was unsuccessful, but it added insult to injury. Binotto, when asked to explain the rationale behind the speeding penalty, which was an increase of 1 km/h, remarked it was really borderline. It was probably by 0.1 km/h in terms of the average speed in the pit lane. We were not utilizing our typical sensors for monitoring the speed because they had failed during the overheating of the front right due to the tear-off of Max, and our recovery approach was possibly not as precise for this 0.1. It has been an extremely unlucky situation all round. It is not because of that we should cease making the courageous decision to try for a fast lap when the conditions are available for us to go for it. Anytime you stop, you run the risk of losing your position. But when the distance to Fernando Alonso behind you is narrow, the risk was increased. When Binotto was asked to defend his strategists once more for their decision to make the late pit stop, he responded by saying, "You need to be daring in F1. If there is any chance at all of getting the fastest lap, as there was, we had enough of a lead over Fernando to be able to make a stop and make an attempt to go for it. I believe that it was the appropriate choice to make. We knew it would have been extremely close to Fernando, but we also knew that Leclerc could take him over because he had the fresher tyres, and we understood that this would benefit in terms of DRS and top-line speed in the main straight. Once more, I believe that picking this path was the best option." Do you think Max Verstappen and Red Bull are at fault here? Please let us know your thoughts in the comment section below, and if you haven't done so already, make sure to subscribe to this channel so that you don't miss any of our incredible videos. Keep an eye out for the next video. Bye for now.